I don't care what your timeline is saying, yo. Look at the data. People are out here struggling, right? Forget the facade that's your IG page or your threads or your Twitter or whatever. The data shows people are currently struggling in this country and the world abroad. What's up, people? Welcome to this episode of the Buy the Hood podcast or webcast, because I don't know how you're consuming this content. I'm your host as always. My name is Jimmy, and as we start off every show, that's with gratitude. I want to shout out all of the members of MDC Strategy, students from Buy the Hood University, as well as the youth from the Buy the Hood Ownership Camp, which is, in going on. We got to head to week 3 now. It's been amazing thus far. I got my partner in crime, Corey. Corey, what's up, good brother?
What's really good, man? Every day is above ground's a good day, so let's go get it.
Yes, sir. And as you know, this is our New Look podcast, right? Where we just come on, we talk about issues that are happening in the world of finance and Black wealth. We try to keep these short, but we do want to have these conversations on a weekly basis so we can check in with our folks. Also talk about some of the interesting articles, observations that we're making in the world of finance. The feedback has been amazing. A lot of people like the short form content because they can get the information and keep it moving. We will be, however, doing some vetting before we bring guests on. Because we definitely want to make sure that we're not bringing on any fugazi people. But, that'll be in the future. But right now, we're going to continue along with what we have. But again, thank you to everybody that supports what we got going on. Today, Core, I have an interesting article, man. For those that are watching the video, you'll see the article. For those that are listening, I will read a little bit of the article as I do, so you can get the context. And I'm also going to take a link to the article, and I'll share that in the show notes as well as the description, so you can read the article if you want. But this is about a Harvard study that was done. And the Harvard study says why a record number of Americans are struggling to pay rent. So despite what your timeline on IG, or should I say Threads now? By the way, follow us on Threads. We're at Buy the Hood. I'm at JW Blueprint. You know what I'm saying? We all on Threads. I don't know if Core's on Threads yet. I doubt it. But,
Nope.
We out there though. So, but with that being said though, regardless of what your timeline says, the data shows that Americans are struggling to pay rent, right? So, this is by Rebecca Chen. Shout out to her. If you happen to be watching this, Rebecca, shout out to you. But it says a record number of American renters are spending at least 1/3 of their income on rents. And that's according to the State of Nations Housing 2023, published by Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies. A total of 21.6 million households now spend more than 30%. Now listen to this, spend more than 30% of pre-tax income on rent. Some households are even paying up to 50% of earnings on apartments, right? And this is per Harvard's research. So it says that tenants spend, housing experts suggest that people spend less than 30% of their income. So if you ever went through the situation where you're looking to buy a home, if you have a good agent, because all agents aren't equal, a lot of them will tell you to try to make your payments about 30% of your income. But people are spending more than 30% right now just on rent, which affects how they live their life, right? So the article goes on to say that housing costs remain well above pre-pandemic levels thanks to substantial increases over the last few years. Why? In large part due to the growth of so-called luxury buildings that have replaced less expensive options. In the last 2 decades, the share of construction for high-priced apartments, known as Class A, grew faster than more affordable ones. In fact, over half, 51%, of 2022 rental construction projects were luxury apartments, and that's data that comes from Moody's. Also, only 34% of the market consisted of high-cost rental units back in 2000. Right. So now, as you see, back then, only 30% of the market was considered high cost rental. And now they're building at a clip that's higher than 50%. So this is some interesting stuff here. One part that I want to add, matter of fact, let me read a little bit more of this. I want to give more context. It says that if rent grows faster than your income every year and healthcare expenses grow faster than your income every year, that squeeze just makes it very difficult in normal life. Right. And that's Catherine McKay of the Aspen Institute says. So you have people building Class A spaces, but there is a need for affordable housing, not just here in our local market, because council is literally having hearings about the Class A office space, Class A office space and needing Class C office space and Class C residential properties, because, by the way, this is also happening in the office sector as well. Office buildings have their own unique situations going on outside of just Class A versus Class C, um, in terms of the need for office space. But this is one of the arguments going on over there. But our council is talking about residentially speaking. Let me go back to that. Residentially speaking, needing affordable housing, for lack of a better term. Let's just call it affordable housing as opposed to going through the classes. But affordable housing is a big problem in every major city right now. But what's interesting about it, and the article talks about it, it says that may not change anytime soon, because many times fancy apartments are the only profitable option for developers, right? Supply and demand is always at work. The majority of construction costs go into purchasing the land, building materials, and building permits. Adding nice finishes doesn't drive costs at a high level, but could demand more rent revenue. So, man, says a lot right there. That one sentence. That may not change anytime soon, because many times fancy apartments are the only profitable option for developers. So we're in a space right now where people are paying more than 30% for their rent. They're struggling to pay rent. Everything else is going up around them. And this just leads to chaos long term. Core, what are your immediate thoughts upon hearing this information? And, what do you think can happen or will happen?
Black people, women, poor people, in that order, are hated in this country.
Okay.
Nobody in this country is more hated than black people. People will do anything they can not to be black in this country, including black people, women, and then poor people. Like, no one cares about these people.
So, man, if I go with your line of thinking, man, imagine being a poor black woman. You hit the trifecta.
You hit the least cared about trifecta.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the numbers ain't numbering. You know what I mean? Like, so you got rising interest rates, which means housing is going to cost more. You got companies who are slashing employees left and right and lowering costs, right? Because everybody was looking to pay up when labor was hard to get, but now that the economy is getting tighter, when the economy gets tighter, labor is actually easier to get because people are looking for, more people are looking for a job. So you got lower paying jobs, higher cost housing, and you got poor people just getting squeezed, right? The poorer you are, the more you're gonna get squeezed.
Yeah.
And so what that tells me is that they don't give a damn about poor people. They're building these larger cities. They're trying to move these larger cities because there's infinitely more poor people than there are people that can afford this stuff. And what they'll do is they'll give it to you whether you can afford it or not, and just keep you on the debt treadmill and just have you running on that debt treadmill forever.
Man, I want to stop you right there because that right there, that point is an interesting point. So I just want to give my perspective. I want to start off by saying this. I don't care what your timeline is saying, yo. Look at the data. People are out here struggling, right? Forget the facade that's your IG page or your threads or your Twitter or whatever. The data shows people are currently struggling in this country and the world abroad. So I want to start with that. Now, after that, I want to say this, right? As I said, supply and demand is always at play here. If you're coming from the other angle as a developer, you kind of have no choice but to develop what's going to be able to pay. The real problem is this. The real problem is inflation and central banking, right? And I know this is going to sound like a rant of a Bitcoiner, but it's not really about Bitcoin in this specific instance, because the thing that makes Bitcoin powerful, in my opinion, is the fact that it's away from the central bankers, right? And this is why, shout out to my brother Kamari, he gets upset because I often criticize capitalism. But, as the Honorable Isabel Wilkerson told us, we live in a caste system. And in the caste system under capitalism, you're going to have that bottom caste, right? Those poor people that Corey talks about, or the women, or the black. So you're going to have that in this caste system. And the fact of the matter is, what you just said resonated with me because you talked about that treadmill. They want everybody running on that treadmill, right? I was thinking about this book right here that I'm reading, right? And I probably shouldn't show this because this got banned in a lot of places, but it's a book called The History of Central Banking, right? And now let me read something that it says on the back of this book because it reminded me of this exact conversation. It talks about what's the biggest scam in the world. It says the scam of money lenders is the ability to literally create money from nothing, then lend and accumulate interest on credit, and then relend that interest for further interest in perpetuity. That creates pervasive worldwide debt from the individual to the family to the entire state. And when you think about our politicians and them and their money printers, every time they print, it's going to have an effect, but sometimes we don't see it right away, but we see it later. When during the pandemic, when we was all, loving those checks coming and all that, everything was
I
cool.
can't lie, man. People was going to die. A lot of the population of the world was going to die from the dope.
I'm not judging whether they did it in, right? All I'm saying is, in the words of Brother Malcolm, the chickens are coming home to roost. Whether they had to or didn't have to, that's not what I'm not making a judgment on that. What I'm saying is
the effects of it is coming, whether we wanted it to or not.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. But the fact of the matter is, it didn't stop there. When we give money to Ukraine or wherever it may be, like you can justify. So here's the thing: from a political standpoint, you can justify a lot of these things.
Yeah, but, yeah. I mean, I'll say this, and I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. This is the conversation.
I'll say this about what you're saying right now. It's the same as it's always been, but it's worse than it ever was. Right.
Okay.
And here's why. It's because everything is digital now. Right. It's easier to keep track of it. So not only is it happening, right? Because before there were systems, but it was very hard to keep those systems in place without really killing people. But now they got technology. They literally can track everything you do. So it's not going to get any better, because when you talk about all of this, right, and just to move the conversation a little left, when you add the digital dollar to this is going to get disgustingly ugly, because you figure we having all these struggles, right? People are in ugly debt right now.
Yes.
Then you got, we're going to have a social system that's going to be fully autonomous and fully computerized, which means there's going to be no hearts and minds behind those screens when it comes time to get a loan, or when it comes time to do all of this. It's literally going to be like a social credit score done autonomously. It's going to get funky ugly for poor people. Like, it's going to get disgustingly funky ugly for poor people. And especially like your homeless class, where, a lot of your homeless class depend on, these live dollars to be like, for example, I went to the store the other day, and there's a homeless man that I give money to almost all the time because, I see black homeless people, I try to get them money.
Yeah.
But I didn't have no dollars on me. I was going to the store. I couldn't give them anything.
No, I mean, it's nothing you can do about it. Yeah, they're going to have to start accepting cash at.
Like, my thing is, I thought, like, that triggered a thought in my head, like, how many other people does this happen with per day? Like, bro, how many people like me per day don't carry cash? Like,
I don't carry it at all. Bro, it's funny. I was in the car with my mother-in-law, and I was taking her to the bank. She asked me to go to the bank, and I'm like, why? She said, she's old school. She said, I want to get some money out. I was like, what you need money for? She was like, just to have on me, and I just need to have some money on me because I feel weird when I don't have cash in the house. I'm like, what? And she was like, you don't have no, look, that's what she said, you don't have no cash? I was like, I started thinking, I was like, I may not have carried cash in like a decade at this point. Like, I mean, I just don't do it. It's almost like having a DVD. Like, it's just like, we're moving in the digital space, right? So our money's going to be digital. It only makes sense that our money is digital. Our books are digital. Our movies, music is digital. Everything.
Yeah, right? So, like, but this is what I'm saying. Like, so to go along with this housing issue that we're having, and then which is caused by a few things, but mainly interest rates, and its effect on builders and on people who are trying to live in these places that are being built. um, it's gonna get disgustingly
Listen, to
ugly.
me, this all goes back to money printing. I'm gonna tell you why, right? Because all those things you said are affected by the same thing, right? So when you talk about the cost of goods and services going up, we know why that happens, and that's your biggest cost as a developer. When you're building something, your costs, your materials and your labor, right?
Yeah,
That stuff costs more. So now on the flip side, you know, if you're talking about especially building to rent, you have to recoup somehow.
which so when you saying that, right? So it brings us back to how this country was founded, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the people looking for cheap labor, like this country, uh, they gave the world the book on how to get cheap labor.
I mean, now you're about to go a whole different place, but I see where you're
But
going.
but what I'm saying is we're reverting back to the need for cheap labor, right? Because if costs are high for us, the reason why costs are high for us because it costs are high for businesses that serve us, right?
Yes.
And so with your two main costs being materials and labor, where they going to cut costs?
Yeah.
And so materials is very hard to cut costs at because you're getting it from a supplier. And
Mm-hmm.
at some point that supplier is paying higher costs to make or and produce it or manufacture
No,
it or
everything
grow it or
costs more.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then which means the place to cut costs is that labor. So now you're talking about slashing jobs or or cutting what those jobs pay in an environment where things are getting progressively more hard to, like the prices are getting higher. Prices in an environment where prices are getting progressively higher.
Yeah.
So you're talking about people getting poorer and poorer every day. You see that gap building
Mm-hmm.
between the salaries that are being paid and what it costs to live. We just did a pod where we were just talking about people were starting every month $2,000 in debt. Not every year, every month.
Every month.
$2,000 in debt. That's 25 racks of debt a year.
Yeah. But
That's,
that
that's
keep but that's why when you said what you said, I was like, maybe that's the plan all along. Keep people on that treadmill.
yeah,
Keep
but
people on that treadmill.
but at some point they have to let the people off or it's going to be a mutiny.
I was having a conversation with Jabbar. Shout out brother Jabbar Fairweather. He's been on the pod before. I was having a conversation with him the other day, and he was in shock because he was trying to do a real estate deal, and the dude that he was doing the deal with didn't have a bank account. And he was like, he didn't understand that. I'm like, you do realize there's a lot of folks without bank accounts out here. For him, it just didn't make any sense that people out here. He was like, dude literally works though. I'm like, okay. He said, dude cashes his check at the check cash in place, and that's how he lives his life. And he was like in total shock by that. I was like, how long was that check cash in place you're talking about been there? He said for years. I was like, you think
How they survive for years? Like yeah, you got to do that simple man.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, this is a reality, but that keeps people in that cast we're talking about. That's a huge problem too. But the point I'm making is people are out here really struggling, and I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell by certain things, but when you start to peel back the layers, a lot of it is affected literally by the cost of money. So your point about labor is an interesting point because I don't see how you can even cut back on that at some point because I don't know. It's just interesting times we're living in.
So they might not cut the number of laborers; they'll just cut the rate at what they pay them, right? Because people want to still need jobs, right? And so now you got, people who are working, and it's going to go back to the days where they was trying to pay doctorate. Like we was looking at Google searches where they was paying doctorates $13 an hour.
Insane,
you know what I mean?
Insane.
Like they was asking for doctorate level, university level studies with somebody at a doctorate level, you didn't put 6 to 8 years of your life into this.
Yeah,
and
there's for the folks that like the books. There's another book. It's called How the Other Half Banks. I think it's by Dr. Mercer Murataran. I think that's the name, but it's called How the Other Half Banks. In fact, if you go to our YouTube channel and look up our YouTube shorts, I did a book review on the book. But in that book, she kind of talks about some of these issues, and she actually points to the check cash in place and its effect and how like that just trickles. Everything you talked about at the higher levels with the suppliers, with the builders, all these things, all those costs end up trickling down to who? The people
to
you
the
talk
consumer.
to, right? Because
Everything trickles down to consumer, and that's what a lot of people in this country don't understand. Most people don't understand that you're a consumer, right? Everybody in this country is a consumer. You are a debt instrument.
yeah,
You are a debt instrument, right? Humans are expensive, right? And you are an expensive debt instrument, right?
mm-hmm.
And so what happens is that as a consumer, if money costs more, you're going to pay more.
Yeah.
Period.
So even
But
like my fellow like landlords and real estate folks, it's funny because I talk to a lot of them and they're just not making what they were making because there's only so far they can go up on their rent, but they haven't.
without getting rid of good tenants.
Yeah, exactly. But they had not. But what they're facing on the other side is an increase in taxes, an increase in insurance, and that's interesting because the reason your taxes are increased is because your property's worth more. So anytime your property becomes more valuable, you pay more taxes. But why is your property worth more? Your property's worth more because the money is trash. Again, it all goes back to money printer go burr. The reason that assets tend to inflate is because the dollar goes down. Corey
Yep.
talks to our students every day, our students that trade, and the first thing you tell them to look at is what?
The dollar.
The dollar, right? Because the dollar will give you an indication of which way that I'm
The
not
market
trying to
moves. The harder money is to get, the
yeah.
harder it is for the market to move in a direction. You know what I mean?
So this is why the study of land to me has always been the most important and this is my opinion, right? I think it's the most important thing in economics is land because of its effect on everything else. Because
monetary policy might be moving up there with land.
Well, that's monetary policy is based on land, right? Because when you talk about value in the production,
I think it's based on people, but but land is right next to it.
All right, so
monetary policy is based on people because monetary policy is about debt and how to either eliminate it or to like basically monetary policy is supposed to keep everything even. Like it's not supposed we're not supposed to be in debt or we're not supposed to have a surplus. Monetary policy is about keeping things at an even keel.
So I've seen that debate, right? So I've seen it from a lot of economists. Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations kind of talks about this, and now I'm getting in my real bag about it being about the people. But if you read Henry George, it's called Progress and Poverty. So there's 4 agents of production that create value in our economy, which is land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship.
Yep.
Right. So when you have land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship / management, because you could also be someone that's managing capital. But when you look at those things, a lot of the value still flows back to the land. Right. So especially in an environment where we are having supercomputers being able to control some of the things that a human would do. And value is not based upon someone's labor in terms of what it takes to create something, right? So some people think that it's the people because their labor is what creates anything. And there's a value in labor, right? But the value isn't in the labor. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you're a person and your labor, the value of your labor builds this phone, and that value is $200. Is that the value because that's what your labor did?
No, it's the value because of the volume of people, supply and demand, basically.
Exactly. So value is actually what someone is willing to pay for your work, not what your work actually creates. What someone is willing to pay for that. All that flows back to the land, though. And this is getting into a real deep, nerdy conversation. But the point being, because I don't want to go off on a tangent because we want to keep these pods short.
Well, but the thing is, that's not a tangent, though, because we're talking about the value of why these things are happening. So this is not really a tangent. This is really
no, it's not. It's not. But the debate between whether it's the people or the land, right? So I understand that debate, but land, right? Land is where it always flows back to, because even with the people, they still need what? They still need that land, to work, to
live off of and do all of anything. Things.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing about land. So no matter, and it's funny. I was talking to a young brother today. Shout out to our sister Janice. I was talking to one of her sons because he was asking me some questions about finance. And one of the things I told him, we were talking about how things come in fads, right? Right now is AI. There was the crypto, there was, the blockchain, there was options trading, there is this, there is that, there's that. And one of the things I told him was, I was like, that's what makes real estate the greatest, because none of that even matters. Because if you are talking about whether you're a doctor and you work at a hospital, guess what? You need space to operate. If you're a lawyer, you need space to meet with your clients. The idea of space doesn't change. No matter what the current fad is that's trending on socials or in the culture, land is land. And I'll leave it at that. But getting back to our original conversation, people paying more money for rent can be scary. And all these things trickle down. And I guess to Corey's point, the people at the very bottom are going to feel this the worst, like as they do with anything else. This system just isn't meant for poor people. So that's one of the things about this caste system that we live in. But let's talk about this before we get out of here, Corey. We want to be solutions based. We just don't want to come on here and talk about the sky is falling every week.
Pontificate about what could be.
Yeah. So, what the average family watching this or listening to this podcast? What are your suggestions of how they can weather this, prepare for what's coming? Because you believe that things will be worse before they get better.
I don't think they're getting better. I just think things are just going to get progressively worse for poor people, because this country has shown over and over again they don't care about poor people.
How does someone prepare or try to minimize the effect of some of these things going on in the economy? What are your opinions?
I personally would, if you're going, you got to work together. Like, for me, it all comes down to, can you work together well enough to not get beat in the head with it? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's crazy. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, people don't like each other, right? Like, when you grow up, you want your own family, your own space, and you know what I mean? Like, people got trauma out here.
No, I get it. I mean, some of the people that you talk to won't even admit that there's a war going on. They don't even recognize what's going on around them, because, and I think that's conditioning too. If I'm worried about paying my bills day to day, I don't have time to have these deep conversations or even think about
like, what is he talking about, old head?
Exactly. Right. So my suggestion would be really, we talk about investing, we talk about all these unique products, but I would think that it goes back to learning how to live off the land, and learning to save, right? Because we've moved into, culturally speaking, moved into this space of everybody chasing a dollar and not recognizing, the real value is in the land and people. Let's say both, my point and Corey's point. So it's why, like, my new obsession on social media, which sounds crazy because I shouldn't be obsessing over anything on social media, but I love finding people that are like black farmers that are living off the land. It's like, it's
funny.
No, it is though. That's my new thing. I love finding them, and it is because there's a lot of them out there. And it's like,
no, for sure.
I love finding our people who are in non-traditional spaces. Like, I was telling Toya this the other day. She sent me a page of this dude who's like a cowboy. He's a straight cowboy, but he's a brother. And it's the funniest, but also the most amazing thing to see. I love finding our people who are in just non-traditional spaces that you see that aren't represented well in, say, popular culture. I like seeing those folks.
I want to live in one or two places. I want to live next to people I like or away from everybody. Like, I don't like, it can't be, I don't want no middle ground. I want to live, like in a place where, where you and Kamari and you know what I mean? Like, we all
people that have the same idea.
Yeah. I like can live near each other. Well, I want to live completely away from everybody, but nobody talk to me and leave me alone.
That has to be strategic. And I'm not even going to get into a deeper conversation, but I've seen other cultures literally do that. I've seen other cultures go into a neighborhood, move into a neighborhood, and their family or friends overpay just to get into that neighborhood. But they built literally a community that, like,
the first three things they build: a bank, school. The first thing they build is a bank, a school, and a place to work, like a business or something.
Or a place to worship.
Because a place to worship, because culture could tie them together, right? Yep. So a bank, a school or religious place.
And as an aside, I'm not talking about one culture. I've seen multiple cultures.
No, I'm not talking about one culture either.
Yeah.
I'm talking
about the funny thing is
different kinds of culture.
I'm talking about right here in Philadelphia.
The neighborhood I used to live in. I used to live right there near 47th and Chester. And I watched these Vietnamese people come They built a church, a school, and a bank. They got a Vietnamese bank around there.
Mm-hmm.
Like they did all this in 5 years. Like it ain't take them 50 years or 200 years. They did this in 5 years.
But that's working as a collective, right? That's working as a collective, right? And then and it's not on a grand scale, because sometimes people say collective, you feel like you have to have everybody. You have to have this.
It's like 20 families, and they was just like, Lord, this is what we doing.
So I mean, that could be a solution too, is to find people that are on the same, have the same energy, same wavelength as you, and you build with them, man. But it's an interesting conversation. I would love to hear you guys' feedback on what you think about the cost of rent, how high it's going, where it is. And shout out to everybody listening or watching this, because our pod dropped late today, but it is all good. We still got it out Wednesday. We got a lot going on in terms of the camp and all that, but we appreciate the support. But give us your feedback. Let us know what you think about anything that we said about the economy, about rent, about these damn central bankers. Also, I'm going to show this book again in case anybody wants to get it. For those that are listening to the audio, I am showing a book. It's called A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind, and it's by Stephen Mitford Goodson. Stephen Mitford Goodson is the author of this book. It's a crazy book. I read it often. It's one of the, so I have several books that I just like go back to, like Creature from Jekyll Island, Bill, Brother Bill, certain books that I study the books because they're written a while ago and you still watch the news.
Everything's still relevant.
Yeah, so you watch it and say, damn.
Like for me, this is why Cast is a book that'll never, you can read that book 100 times and the information will never get old.
As you can tell, if you've listened to our podcast, that's one of our favorite books. We talk about certain books all the time, Powernomics. Like we don't talk about the quote unquote, I like to call the IG books, like the rich. We don't care about none of them purple books, F-bull. But Isabel Wilkerson's book, Bill Brother Bill is another one. Yep. Leon Sullivan's book.
Leon Sullivan.
Creature from Jekyll Island is another one.
That book is nuts.
But I think I'm adding this to the list because
this is just central banking.
Because this is just about history. And matter of fact, I'm gonna tell you the one thing that it says in here, which is crazy, as when you talk about what's going on currently in the news. And it's talking about history, but this is a history of banking in general. But it says that if history is compromised by falsifications and omissions, which are frequently imposed by outsiders, then that civilization will decay and finally collapse. It says that the most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of history, right? We talk about certain schools trying to eliminate history, but they're talking about the true history of banking and why no one really talks about it. But if you don't understand that, then some of the things that are in front of you won't understand. So, it is what it is, man.
And the reason why I showed that book on here is called Urugu. It's an African-centered critique of the European cultural experience and behavior. If you have not read Urugu, and you're going to take a while to read it, this book is like 800 pages. It's like 600 pages.
You want your War and Peace, John?
It's 600 pages, but
it reminds me of a quote from Neely Fuller. He says that if you don't understand white supremacy, then nothing else is going to make sense to you.
Nothing else makes sense. Did you ever watch the Neely Fuller videos that I showed you that I talked about?
Yeah. So I'm doing my analysis of some of his thoughts right now.
Yo, my man,
as compared to others,
a great scholar. Him and it's a lot of them, but him and oh my God. What was oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. The psychologist, the African psychologist, the boy
who, Dr. Umar?
No, man.
I'm messing with you, bro.
Dr. Umar is nice, but
I'm messing with you, bro. But who you talking about?
I'm talking about the one who opened this school, got like 8 books. Just passed away.
It's so many of our folks that
no. I'm drawing a blank right now. I'll have the name next week when we talk.
Yeah.
But
and also, last thing before we get out of here, I want to say this though.
The camp.
Our camp is fly. Our camp is going on. Shout out to all the students in the camp. The MDC, our membership group, right? We're making drastic changes to it. So next time we do a pod, you'll hear more about some of those changes.
Those drastic changes.
Yeah, man, but it's amazing, man. And shout out to all the folks in that group because we got a number of folks that in the group with us every day having conversations about finance, books, all that kind of stuff. So with that being said, though, please leave us some feedback. Let us know what you think about anything we said this episode, specifically about the rent, because anytime we talk about anything involving macro or microeconomics, it just goes into a tangent because that's what we do. But we're letting you in our conversation.
We in the markets every day, so it's different when you in the markets every day and you see how much money and where money start and where it ends up. Like it's a different look at the world.
Yeah,
like, if you're not into the markets, right? It's like watching As the World Turns, except for these is real companies and real people. Like it's like a soap opera. It's like a melodrama, except for nothing mellow about the drama. Like real people getting smacked out here, real people getting hurt. Like it's crazy out here. Like it's some podcasts that we could talk about, the business podcasts that we could talk about, but the actual market, being in the market and seeing what these companies and how they function and what they do and how they do it. Like when you see that most of these companies is trash and that they don't make money, like it'll change your whole perspective on how you look at things.
Everything, because that's how. And not to put down any of my fellow real estate investors, but I realize a lot of them are broke. They just got a ton of debt. Debt looks good until it don't. You know what I'm saying? So man, I mean, to quote our brother Russell Hughes, man, he said that macroeconomics has the biggest impact on all markets. Right? And that goes into politics, land, and I'm not trying to go for another tirade, so we're gonna get out of here. Everybody give us some feedback. Let us know what you think. Follow us on all social platforms at
Sponsor a child in our camp.
Also, yeah, if you want to donate to the camp, because we have had a lot of people that have sent donations. Anybody that donations, anybody that sends money to $ by the hood, it actually goes to the babies. What we do with any money that's donated is we give a stipend at the end of the camp to all the kids to start them on their journey of investing. We got about 60 kids this year, all dope. Yo, shout out to our kids. I got a video today. We sent some kids out to do some field work for us, and one of them actually got back with a video. So I'm looking forward to showing that during class this weekend. It's gonna be dope. With that being said, though, give us your feedback, show us love, follow us on Threads at By the Hood. But as we always say, it's not about how much money you make; it's about how much you keep. Game elevates. We'll see you guys on our next episode. Peace.